What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Paul Brown here. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jeremy Kennedy ahead of the opening round at the PFL Global Tournament for 2025. Jeremy, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Obviously, now we're going to see you back in action for the first time since late 2024, and that whole year was maybe, I guess you'd probably call it the toughest one of your career. I think that's the first time you've picked up consecutive losses. A
Yeah.
difficult 2024. What did the year as a whole teach you?
Yeah, man. It's tough. Like first time in my career losing, two in a row. Just different circumstances around the whole, both fights. It's both of them were last minute switch ups. And I've just kind of grew a lot from that. Now I'm not necessarily fixating on certain opponents. I went from Gallagher to Pitbull, which is a big step up, and then Pinedo to Braga, in 24 hours. So I was so fixated on these certain matchups that now I'm just training my body, just me being the best physical shape, sharpening my own tools, and just seeing how some other I helped Islam near the end of his last camp, and I just noticed that he's not worried about what other guys are doing. He's just worrying about being the best Islam, his recovery, his conditioning, his sharpness, his striking, his grappling. And I kind of that's one thing the biggest thing I picked up from him was just you got to be ready to fight anybody at any time, especially now I'm going into a tournament. So again, I'm training for Movlid, but he hasn't fought in a couple of years, the Ramadan, whatever. Like I'm just, anything can happen. I'm anticipating fighting, any of these 8 guys with the alternates. So I'm just training myself, being the best I can be. And it's turned into a great camp. It's been a tough, grueling camp just because I'm my own, battling my own self, trying to be the best me and trying to one up myself. But yeah, just make sure I'm in shape, make sure my weight's on point, make sure I'm healthy. And come April 3rd, whoever's standing across from me, I'm just focusing on my game.
That's probably a really good mindset. I mean, given the kind of Grand Prix nature of the tournament as well, there's anything could happen, like you said. And obviously,
And it does.
Gabriel Braga
Anything
is,
can, and it does happen.
yeah, this is one of those sports, isn't it, where just
Yeah.
chaos seems to ensue right when you just think things are settling down.
Yeah.
But Gabriel Braga is actually in the tournament as well, which is interesting too. So, like you said, you don't know who you're going to end up across the cage from. So it'll be it's better to be maybe prepared for what you can do rather than what your opponent is going to do. How
Exactly.
did the opportunity of the tournament come about?
So they wanted me to do the tournament last year, 2024. But I was right, knocking on the doorstep of that title shot. So I was holding out for that for a while. And then it came down to do I want to do the tournament and commit to a year of that, or are we still hunting this Pitbull fight? And obviously I chose the Pitbull fight, and that's why they gave me Gallagher, because I had waited a year and a half at that point or something, and he was just scheduled to Pitbull just got scheduled for that champion versus champion last February. So that's how that all came about. And so I know the tournament was always in my ear and something I was interested in. But after waiting that long, and then after the Pitbull fight, it was, I think, 8 months until I got booked for that November card. The activity was kind of bugging me and killing me. I wanted to build momentum. I wanted steady, continuous fights, and not long gaps in between. You have 15 minutes in there and then you wait 10 months to do it again. So that's what was really appealing with the tournament for me, especially now with fighting in November. It's only really 4 months from then till this start. So I feel like I just was there. Little bit of a reset, jumped right back into camp, and then now this one, and then I get, all goes well, I got another one in June, all goes well, I got another one in August, and that's just something, the point in my career that I wanted. I'm 32, now it's like my prime years, and now I just want to make things happen. I want to be fighting. I don't want to be just training all the time and waiting for these one-off fights. So that was the biggest thing for me with the tournament, and as soon as that last fight ended, I was in the ear of Eduardo and Kogan and Ali, my manager, and everybody. I was like, hey guys, I want that tournament, whatever it costs, whatever it takes. And so that, I think it was the day after Christmas, I got the contract for the tournament, and that was it. I was happy. I didn't care who was in it, who I got first, anything. I wanted the activity.
That gives you a good kind of, I mean, the day after Christmas, you said, so that gives you a good sort of 3 to 4 months to prepare,
Yeah.
maybe mentally and physically, for what could very well be a very grueling schedule. I mean, if you go all the way in the tournament, or at least get to the final, it's 3 fights in 5 months. Have
5 months.
you
Yeah.
done much differently in your preparations with that in mind?
No, I kind of kept this one as a regular full hard long camp. And then, once we get through this one, then I'm gonna adjust things and taper, because I just did do a full camp, and I'll have just fought. I'll be in shape. It'll just be more of no downtime in between. It'll be, coasting, keeping the diet on point. Probably stick away from sparring a little bit for a couple weeks, and keep the fitness up. But I'm just looking at it as a 5 month camp, so peaking and then kind of coming down a little bit, and then I'll start ramping it back up again. But I took this first 3 month camp, essentially 10 weeks, as like a normal regular camp, regular sparring, regular everything, like I would for any fight. Get through this one, and then we can kind of taper and adjust how we need to.
Getting through this one means getting past Movlid Khaybulaev, which is not an easy task. He's a very, very tough opponent. Give us your thoughts on what he brings to the table.
Yeah, he's very good at obviously that Dagestani style, that wrestle heavy, follows their game plan, stubborn with his wrestling. But the one thing I bring confidence in is I don't fear that at all. A lot of these guys, when you think you got a Russian against you, standing across the cage, or a Dagestani, you're, oh man, I can't get taken down. And this guy's wrestling is so good, and I'm not concerned about that. Obviously, it's something I have to be aware of, and I know it's going to be competitive in that field, but I don't see him being able to relax and rest and get, secure a takedown and get comfortable. I'm going to be making him work every second of that fight, and any kind of takedown he does get, it's not going to last. I'll be right back up on my feet. I counter wrestle very well. I've spent some time training with that whole team, like I mentioned, with Movlid himself as well. So we both know it's not that kind of fight. He's not going to have this big wrestling advantage that he has over everybody else. And so that might make things more of a striking match as well. And I don't know how he's approaching it. Like I said, I'm approaching mine as I'm fighting anybody. I'm fighting Braga. I'm fighting Pinedo. I'm fighting Borix. I'm fighting any of them right now. I'm just the best shape I am. And from the feet to the floor, I'm just bringing violence this tournament.
You've trained with Movlid?
Yeah, man, actually, so I trained with them in 2021 during like the pandemic, AKA was closed, and California was a nightmare. So they were all up in Vegas at the Apex. And so same management. And so I spent like about 6 weeks training with them then. And that was 4 years ago. And then Islam's last fight in January, I was helping him out again here near the end of his camp, and Movlid was there. I even worked with Movlid. I knew I was in the Grand Prix. He didn't at the time. He thought he might do one more fight, and he kind of was thinking didn't know what he wanted to do next. And I get along with him great. So yeah, we trained then, and then 3 weeks later, I got the call that he's my first opponent, and he's in the tournament. So it's funny how it all played out. That's the MMA world, man. It's crazy how things all plan out. But yeah, I was training with him in January.
Wow. Have you ever fought anybody before that you've kind of trained a decent amount with?
Not really. No, this is a little bit new, but I kind of like it. It gives me comfortability, in the sense of I'm not intimidated. And sometimes when you're fighting a guy and all you do is see pictures of him and videos of him fighting other people, you never know how it's going to feel. But I've actually physically felt him, and when I see him standing across the cage, it could just easily be at the Apex down the road. So that kind of brings me a little bit more grounding and less anxiety around fights that I typically get. Just even fight weeks is the first time you ever see the guys in the flesh. I remember Pitbull was a guy I've watched forever. And then we ended up flying into Dublin or Belfast right at the
Belfast,
same
wasn't it?
time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right at the same. Sorry, the one with Pedro was in Dublin right after, before. But we flew right in at London at the same time and like saw each other at the gate. And I just remember kind of being like, "Whoa!" Like seeing him in the for the very first time. And then that's not going to be an issue for me this time, or any anxiety or any of that. Nerves kind of calmed right down for this one.
Yeah, it takes away that little bit of mystique, I suppose.
Exactly. I guess that's my thing, especially with the Dagestanis too, and that aura they have on them with the grappling. I've been in those rooms, so I know what that feels like. I know what they go through. I know what their training camps look like, and yeah, I'm just ready for this one, man. I'm It's pretty cool. Like, yes, he's definitely probably the toughest matchup in this tournament, stylistically wise, and just his record, his resume, everything. But I'm happy I have this one. I feel like him being his undefeated record and former champion and everything like that, it's going to be great to, first of all, hand him his first loss. And then second, that it's a great way to kick into this tournament is taking out arguably the number one seed.
A win like that makes a massive statement, I suppose, to kick things
Yeah,
off.
exactly. And then I think on my side of the bracket, we got Kelly and the Korean guy, Kim.
Kim, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know much about them, but that'll be a pretty big statement heading into that matchup too.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was about, because obviously Braga is on the opposite side of the bracket, and obviously you're going to know quite a bit about Braga, but Kelly and Taekyung Kim are next in line. Whoever wins that fight will be the next one you face. But you're not really, by the sound of things, looking too far past your first opponent right now.
No, I can't. Like, there is no April 4th, man. The April 3rd is the end. No matter what, nothing else happens after that. And, my life can look at two different directions come that day. So, the way I'm looking at it is I get the saying, like, there is no tomorrow. And that's just April 3rd to me is just, bro, there's nothing else after that. I don't care about June. They announced that it was in Nashville. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But like, I don't even care where, when, what, who. Nothing matters other than Orlando in April 3rd and Movlid.
It's one of my favorite Apollo Creed quotes, I have to say. Yeah. But it's a nice mindset to go by, I suppose, because you can get trapped up by thinking, looking too far past the first guy, and then you never get to see the second guy anyway.
No, exactly. Like, you worry about things that never happen. The only thing I do wish in a distant, a lot of things have to happen, but is I get Braga or Borix in the finals. Just get a little redemption with a title and the money and all that would be nice. But that's so far down the line that I'm not really looking at that second fight or even the finals really. But that is just something that's kind of cool on how there's two guys on the other side that I want to get my hands on. And so I'm hoping Borix can get it done against Pinedo. I kind of have history with that whole side of the bracket. So it'll be kind of cool to see how that one plays out.
Yourself and Borix and I suppose Pinedo as well, three of the biggest, tallest featherweights, I think, floating around. Yeah. So it's interesting to see.
And I fought Borix back in 21. I was supposed to fight Pinedo in November, and then he missed weight, and I ended up fighting Braga, who's also on that bracket. And then Yves Landu has been a long time Bellator guy, and his name was floated around me a few times throughout then. So yeah, I'm kind of interested how that whole thing plays out. I'll be watching as a fan on that side of the bracket until come August, but any of those four would be kind of cool to end up facing in the finals.
And I mentioned there, like, three of you are quite big. I think you're all roughly around 5'11", whereas your next opponent, Movlid, is like 5'6".
Yeah.
does that give him a little bit of a leg up, pardon the pun, in the whole approach to maybe getting close to your hips and getting a takedown? It kind of gives him a head start, I think, does it?
Yeah, well, like, wrestling those kind of guys are always tough in the open. But my style of wrestling is a lot of cage work, and I make sure I find myself there. Even if he were to happen to get a takedown in the open, it's not going to be there long. I'll be scooting to the cage, and that's a whole nother game, and that's the game I feel comfortable in. And like I said, I felt these guys before. I would give them the advantage in an open mat wrestling, no walls, no nothing, freestyle, folk style, Greco, whatever. But that's not MMA. And stylist, I think I use my range and make him work coming in and make him work once he's in. So I think I just hope his gas tank's there, because my little shots, jabs, long range with my reach, he's going to be having to deal with that, and then covering the distance once he gets in and wants to wrestle. there's going to be a lot of chain wrestling involved. He's not just going to get a takedown and get to cruise, the round out. So biggest thing is he's going to have to work for everything.
Final one. What will be the biggest obstacle to you winning the overall tournament this year?
I think, having to go through guys like Movlid, and then obviously whoever that whole side of the bracket, that other side stacked, I'll have to potentially avenge, one of two losses or face a former champion in Pinedo. So I just think the caliber of this tournament is probably the highest PFL has been able to put together. So it's not necessarily the time frame, the timetable. I'm okay with it. I live a lifestyle of training camp, whether it's the weight cuts, but again, you keep your weight low in between, and it's just the quality of opposition for me that I think is going to be the hardest obstacle to get through healthy. These are going to take everything. There is, like I said, there's going to be wars each step of this way.
Listen, the very best of luck on April 3rd. Thanks so much for your time today, Jeremy. You've been
Appreciate
great.
it, man. Thank you. My man. Have a good one.